before review, before lunch.
Don't mention that.
Yeah.
No, there's
Don't feel bad, but there's chalk between us and lunch.
That's right, dessert before lunch.
That's right. We're going to be going up to Rochester. There you go.
Never heard that before.
It doesn't get a lot of movies.
We don't want your time there.
Tilly
Don't
is
worry
a dual degree candidate also with architecture and historic preservation, and she's going to take us to Rochester on a project which is dealing with a historic bridge slash viaduct slash street.
Yes. Okay. So first, I would like to say thank you to my architecture chair, Professor Matt Bell, as well as my preservation chair, Don Linebaugh, and my third chair, which is Carl Dupuy. And I'd like to also say thank you to my fellow Thesis students for helping and supporting me through this, as well as my fiance, who has listened to this for now 100 times, so just one more. So this thesis is entitled Reclaiming Identity, Utilizing Historic Fabric to Revitalize Downtown Rochester. Sorry. And this thesis is looking specifically at a piece of infrastructure that is integral to Rochester's historical narrative and identity, known as the Broad Street Bridge. It has been built over two centuries in the 19th and 20th century, and has transformed and expanded with the growth of Rochester itself. Currently, the top portion of the bridge is threatened for demolition, and this thesis is offering an alternative proposal that is looking to adaptively reuse the entire structure and essentially filling the void in the heart of downtown. The interior of this bridge, as I'll explain, has been vacant since the 1950s. And through adaptive reuse and through creating programmatic purposes and functions within the interior of the bridge, this will activate downtown Rochester, help activate downtown Rochester. So if you don't know where Rochester is, it is in upstate New York in Monroe County. The county itself is bordered on the northern side by Lake Ontario, which is one of the Great Lakes. The city of Rochester itself has two arms that extend up towards Lake Ontario, and the center city where the bridge is located is 8 miles south of the lake. So Rochester's reason for being is the Genesee River, which is flowing north towards Lake Ontario and is bisecting the city. And this was used to generate power for mills and factories in the 1800s. But Rochester's success came out of the creation of the Erie Canal in the 1820s. And in order for the Erie Canal to go through the heart of downtown Rochester, a structure was needed to be created to do so. So Rochester had one of 4 aqueducts that was created for the Erie Canal. This is the second aqueduct that was created. The first one failed structurally, and this aqueduct was then created in 1842, built concrete and limestone, and extending 7 bays across the river. In the early 1900s, the Erie Canal was rerouted south of the city and throughout the state of New York between Albany and Buffalo. And many cities and towns then had an empty ditch within the heart of the cities, just like Rochester, as you see in the top left photo. And a lot of other places across upstate New York decided just to fill the ditch in with asphalt in order to create roads, but Rochester was a little bit more ambitious and decided to relieve street congestion by putting the streetcars in the ditch and then building a street up top. So in that lower left photo, you see this cap that is added onto the bridge, or onto the aqueduct, therefore creating this viaduct with multiple layers of transportation. Sorry. Yeah, that's the aqueduct itself.
Water before.
Yes. Yeah, so that's the canal bed right there. Yes.
Special question?
So this is the interior of the aqueduct. There, on one side, there were 2 rails for the streetcars, the subway, and then on the southern side, there's 2 rails for freight train. And then as you can see, the vehicular street above, which is Broad Street. The subway itself was very short-lived. We're not known for a subway system. Opening in 1927, ultimately closing in 1956. And what is left is what you see here is just a canvas for graffiti artists over the past 50 plus years. But the top of the bridge is still used for vehicular traffic today.
Where's that photograph? I'm sorry, where's the photograph taken?
So the top photograph is here just looking down.
The river's on this side.
Well, the river's on both sides, yeah.
Photograph.
Yes, yeah. And then the other one is just looking more towards this central portion, towards the north.
And you're looking Riverside.
Yes.
If you look out this window, there would be a river there, right?
Correct.
And then this is, you're looking further.
Yes, that's this center portion.
I just want to know where the photographs are taken from.
Rochester.
Yeah, Rochester. So, like I'm saying, with the history of the aqueduct and the bridge, it is congruent with Rochester's history and development. Ultimately, in 1956, when the subway closes, that is, again, congruent with the decentralization of the city, which many other cities, mid-sized cities across America were seeing with the rise of suburbanization. So this project is ultimately trying to breathe a new life into this artifact and give it a 21st century purpose and bring it into the future instead of taking it back into the past as the current city plans are proposing. So to understand a little bit more about the character of downtown today, there has been an influx in population. So between 2010 and 2017, there's been a 122% increase in population within the inner city, which is confined by the inner loop that you see here, also up here, which is that arterial highway. And this diagram is showing in the dark, or the brown color, the existing residents or residential housing, and the yellow is the proposed housing. Again, just to try to put more people downtown, fill this housing gap, and also help activate and create a 24/7 life or street presence by having mixed-use residential instead of just solely residential downtown. Another component is looking at the Genesee River Trail. So on the left-hand side, we have the existing river trail, which is discontinuous. It's not following either, or it's not continuously following the river itself. So the proposal is having this continuous trail on either side in order to utilize the Genesee River as this amenity. It's also important to note what is immediately around the bridge as well. Just to the north of the bridge, this top right photo is the Rochester Riverside Convention Center, which hosts a wide variety of events, from small private events to auctions and larger city-scaled events. And then there's the Blue Cross Arena here on the western side, just south of the bridge. And this has everything from sporting events to monster truck rallies and Disney on Ice, things like that. So it's reaching a wide demographic within the city and within the suburbs. And then just directly across the Blue Cross Arena is the Rundell Memorial Library, which was built in 1935, and it's important to note that this building was built over the existing mill race. So in that existing plan, there's a mill race here, and then also over the Rochester subway tracks. So again, the space that's underneath this library is suffering the same fate as the interior of the bridge as well, being this void, looking for an opportunity and program. And lastly, I wanted to note the landmarks and the architectural heritage or character of downtown. The bridge itself is listed at the national level, along with everything else that you see in light blue. And again, the plans are calling for a partial demolition to bring it back to its first stage of, first period of significance. And this thesis is offering the alternative by adaptively reusing the bridge in its entirety. Because again, there's a lot of architectural character downtown. This bridge should have the same fate as these other buildings. So in order to respectfully reuse this bridge, there's several rehabilitation strategies that I looked at. And the first was to close off the Broad Street bridge to vehicular traffic in order to create a walkable public environment. The next, looking at the interior of the bridge, is to create circulation on the southern side, so this side here, and then infilling with program on the northern side. And then ultimately looking at that infill and deciding to create raised access flooring in order to allow for mechanical, electrical to go through this and provide enough space for that, but also because the center, the bottom of those arches are raised 4 feet up. So by raising the floor, you're allowing for continuous flow between both halves of the bridge. And it's also allowing for viewers on the inside to look out into the city. So I just wanted to run through the different levels first before going through these plans. 0 level is the original canal bed, +4 is that raised floor, and then +22 is the existing street level. So seeing there, 0 level is here running west to east as a circulation path. And then our +4 level is that raised access floor that extends to the sunken plaza, as well as the underneath the library, that's also at +4. And then again, +22 is being the street level. So going from the west to the east and looking at this design, between the Aqueduct building, which is being converted into office and residential, and the Blue Cross Arena, there is this plaza space that can have a multitude of different purposes throughout the seasons in Rochester. First is to provide for farmers market or other craft or festivals. We have a lot of festivals in Rochester, and this can become an alternative space for these vendors. The next is to have food trucks within this plaza space to serve the office workers and the residences downtown. And the last has to do with our very long winters, to provide an ice skating rink within this plaza, and also having some sort of market, a winter market space, a place where you can rent your skates, get a nice hot cup of cocoa, anything like that. And then as you continue east, you, on the top of the bridge, you are going to enter this sculpture garden, which you can see up here, which features different raised planters and bosques of trees with benches that are fitting in and sculptures that are placed in between these planters. And as you continue all the way to the east, you're in the upper portion of this plaza, and you can enter the new retail within this new mixed-use residential building on the east side. If you choose to go on the interior of the bridge, you would enter this long ramp, and you can access both the 0 level, again taking you all the way across to this plaza space, or the +4 level where you will enter or go into the restaurant and pub that's located here. And as you continue to the east, you'll see the lantern, which is in these, right here, as well as in that vignette. And this lantern is also providing light into the interior of the bridge, but also a form of egress in and out. And then the last space here as being this museum and gallery space that can be this affiliate branch for the Memorial Art Gallery that doesn't have museum space in the center city. And that is also congruent with the sculpture garden that's occurring up top. And then when you leave the bridge, you're entering this sunken plaza that also has different usage. So as I have up on the screen and up here as well, the amphitheater-like seating and stairs can be utilized for cinema screenings, for concerts, for play or dance performances. Rochester has a very big jazz festival, so this can be an alternative space for these concerts. If you continue to the this one. So you continue to the north, there is also alternative residential or retail space that is overlooking the river. And then going south underneath the bridge, there is a restaurant as well as this test kitchen space. So Rochesterians can go and take culinary courses and the like. Over the existing mill race, there is an extended walkway that leads to a set of stairs to get you back up to street level, and that is part of the Genesee River Trail. So ultimately, this thesis is looking at programming the interior of this bridge as well as the interior or the underneath of the library by respecting the history, allowing for all periods of its history to be visible, including the graffiti art as well. And by adaptively reusing the structure, we are filling that void in the heart of downtown, and this bridge will then serve as a catalyst for future revitalization efforts in the city of Rochester. So with that, I'd like to open up to questions. Oh, so this is the ramp that's going down. So it's this open air ramp.
Really quickly before, I might have missed it. Did you make the choice to close traffic across the bridge?
Yes, yes.
As part of your exploration, and could you help us understand what that traffic is currently doing in the immediate area?
Yeah.
And why you made that decision?
So, okay, so that's why I also printed this. So within the inner loop, this is about a 2-mile stretch. There are 4 vehicular bridges. So closing off one bridge is not going to impact the traffic in downtown Rochester. I talked to the city planner, and again, with that current project that they are doing, by taking off the cap of the bridge, they're also making a promenade. So they're already closing traffic. So I figured that that was part of the go-ahead. But there isn't, again, this is only 2 miles, and there's 4 bridges in total.
Okay. I like the idea of, obviously historic preservation, preserving this piece of infrastructure. I just wonder if there could have been other uses, in that lower level.
Yeah.
Other than just another passageway. Because
Yes.
you're going to be able to have the passageway on the top, right?
Yes, so one of the reasons to have the interior passageway is because we have a very long winter. So this is helping have people being able to cross, go into these different event spaces from parking garages on the east over to the west side.
But it's a short distance, actually, right?
Well,
And
this
you have to-
is from this point to this point, that's 1,000 feet. So the bridge itself is over 400 feet long. It's
Sure.
a lot bigger.
That's like a block.
Yeah, But it's
you
cold.
have to, my daughter lives there. I visited
Okay.
before. I was surprised one time in April seeing snow still.
yeah.
So landing.
Snow is ending soon.
But you have to come out. I mean, for instance, if this is public infrastructure, right? Maybe that, maybe I'm just throwing in some other program.
Yeah.
Maybe that could have been affordable housing, for instance.
Yeah.
It's property that is owned by the taxpayers, so why not? And I also think you simply took the infrastructure and preserved it, and that's part of your discipline here. But at the same time, the building you said that has the retail, is that existing or is that your,
This is new.
as in your?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I think the challenge would have been better to make that project speak to this bridge and have a better connection. So it's just the next step.
Yes.
The lantern, for instance, in that drawing, so is this glass or some sort of polycarbonate, where you kind of,
Yeah, so it's glass.
okay, because it's drawn as if it's solid. And then the same thing for the bridge. Are those shadows under the arches?
Yes.
But there's no surface, right? There is.
There is. It's darker under there because of there's like an overhang up top, this top layer too.
I'm just asking this, so it's not sort of bumped off the river, it goes.
Yes, the river, yeah.
You were down there and the river would go through.
Yes.
Like the bridges in Paris, right? So that's what I think is just maybe the next step or more of a challenge to go beyond, let's say, this piece of infrastructure and repurpose it. And then what else happens to sort of support that?
Okay.
Does on the model, it looks like the floor structure for the streetcar cuts across the bridge. If you turn back to the way it was, it comes down, bottom of it comes down below the top of the arch. Is that existing?
No. This was just for structural purposes to keep this model together. So yes, so it is continuous, yes. Yeah.
Well, looking at, this is a great presentation, by the way. Thank you. Looking at the second section down, which is through one of the lanterns, and also through the passageway, I'm still seeing that the sill, even though you've raised the floor 4 feet, the window sill is still way up above
Yes.
eye level.
So the raising up 4 feet is for the interior only, it's not for the exterior. This is up 9 feet from the original canal bed.
Right. So what I'm wondering is if the walkway could have gone way up so that people could see through, and that this could be retail on both sides with the floor down here.
Yeah.
Retail of some sort.
Yeah,
So you could
some
get double
use.
loaded use.
Yeah.
I agree with that comment. I was thinking that actually as Amy was saying that. I like the nods to the High Line in New York, having an activated garden over forward transportation. I started thinking of like the Musée d'Orsay and looking at that image, and I was wondering, well, what if the whole thing was programmed as a museum, but then you start talking about the connection and the
Yes.
walking pathways and the snow and everything. So then I started thinking about your ramp. And I was like, that would be, if that was covered,
Yeah.
another light pavilion piece to entice people in. They're protected from the snow. It gives them a place, maybe there's shelter from the ice skating rink as well. And that
But the section is wide enough that you could have had a program and passageway. Just like you were saying.
Well, the ultimate idea with the diagram here is to keep the southern side in its raw form as it is today, and then just to infill the northern side with the program. So it's allowing for that, where that circulation is happening, to see the bridge as it is existing in its current state.
But you're repurposing it, so
Yes. Yeah.
get more mileage.
Okay.
What's the interior dimension of the?
Yes, so the interior dimension between here and here, that is 55 feet. So each side is about a little less than 25 feet because of the thickness of that interior structure.
Did you look at the little?
Yes. Yeah. Earlier proposals were looking more at having retail on both sides, but then I switched to having one side as that infill and the other side is circulation.
So you carved away part of the driving surface to create the amphitheater.
Yes.
It's like perfect use for that. It's just naturally shaped for that kind of use. I question that kind of balcony overload. Somehow it seems to be pitched right at the water's edge.
This?
Yes,
Oh, that's existing.
but so was the covering.
Yeah, so the reason that this is cut out is because this is not part of the bridge itself. I didn't want to cut away at the covered portion of the current bridge.
Oh, I see, because it's like the last span.
Yeah, so the last span makes a little bit of a kink.
Did you consider bicycle usage? You mentioned something about the trail. Is that just a pedestrian trail?
It's both bicycle and pedestrian. So there are elevators across on either sides that can be used to get down to the lower levels.
Okay, but it's not intended to cross on this bridge, pedestrians or bicycles on the...
Bicycles, it's certainly wide enough, it's 80 feet wide to have bicycles and pedestrians.
If you're on the trail, I have a question. So if I'm on the north side of the bridge, I'm on the south, I'm walking up to this wall, kind of what happens, like how I interact with the bridge. So you can see that experience, you step over the bridge. What happens?
So on the eastern side, you are going underneath the library on a walkway through the sunken plaza and then continuing at the same level, continuing north. And then on the west side, there's the park that you see here. You're entering either up the stairs or into an elevator to then get up to that plus 22 level, and then you're entering into this aqueduct building that's carved out for continuous usage and views of the river. And then on the site plan, just north of the aqueduct building is the aqueduct park, so then you're entering that park and continuing north on the river's edge.
So
Go ahead.
I'm struggling a little bit with the lantern.
Okay.
Just even as a form, as its placement on this bridge. I agree with the comment before about potentially covering the ramp area with something that is more of a beacon. And I'm also having a little bit of a hard time with the fact that it seems more just a pathway on the top. We talked about it as a sculpture garden, but the images don't show sculpture in there, and they don't really show much interaction. And so I would consider kind of rethinking that top zone and maybe distinguishing more between that and the lower level, which is also a pass-through. It's covered. Are there windows in there?
Yeah, so it's maintaining the arched openings.
But it's glazed in?
On the southern side, that circulation path, that's still open to the elements, just the infill is being glazed in.
I mean, I think maybe the upper, my point being, the upper level where it's open and exposed, I think that could have just a completely different nature.
Yeah.
Where there is something that is more active on that open space instead of like a nicer pathway through, just to get from here to there, it could be an active space.
Just other thought that occurs to me is you carved out
How do I for Mike? So it seems like you almost had, and I don't mean this the wrong way, you almost had like a blinder on focusing too much on the bridge itself, and I question how the bridge interacts with the adjacent areas. And as you were talking about the amphitheater, I thought a lot about how Chicago has redeveloped the Riverwalk recently. And the cool thing that happens there is as you're going along, you hit these bridges and these overhangs, and you actually end up going out into the water and like creating these like floating backs that you can go out and experience your right at the water's level to kind of weave back in. It would have been nice on both sides to somehow thought about, as opposed to, and I get you can go up the stairs, go into an elevator.
Yes.
So physically, yes, you can get there. There's something nicer about if there's a more grand experience of like navigating that edge condition, and also the height difference between the two. The other minor thing is really minor, right? Just to think about as you're presenting the project, is I think the two things that would come on is the act of closing off traffic is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage you to start just explaining that, because as you were discussing the project, I kept getting distracted thinking about where the cars go, where the cars are at. And the other one, which I think is really interesting, I love how in this diagram in the middle here, just perhaps some folks that come like closest to it, but at one point you can like tell a story about what happens throughout this, this span of like going along. You've got the diagram to kind of begin this big, there's market stalls, food trucks, ice skates, and then you kind of switch to details.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if you continued that same one, you could like tell us a story. It just brought us in a little bit more to the story of like how does this actually unfold if I'm experiencing from east to west or west to east. Either one.
Thank you.
Kelly, I'm curious what your rules or your parameters were for where you allowed yourself to make penetrations in the bridge. Because you've obviously made an exception for what you call a lantern. But I think we've all talked about maybe there's the potential to bring other buildings that you've created literally on top of the bridge. This model is very interesting because that you could imagine, like they do with the High Line, sort of dipping down towards the water so that you can really get down and engage it. I mean, very Franklin, right? So what were your rules that you set up that sort of kept you within the parameters? Were they historic preservation based? Were they moral based?
Probably both. I wanted to have a lighter architectural touch to the bridge because I wanted to really preserve the integrity and the memory of what is there. So I didn't want to line the entire top of this new layer of buildings and structures. So again, it was really about infilling the interior space but having this lantern that is centrally located on the bridge as a form of egress, but also to, again, allow light in, but also become this beacon that if you're traveling anywhere in the city and you're seeing this bridge, if you're crossing another bridge, that this is kind of this glowing light that you're going towards and seeing what is here.
Where, the choice to put it in the center of the bridge,
Yeah.
was that, what were the sort of intentions behind that? Versus it being more of an entry or exit point?
Yeah. I think the alternate reason I had it in the center is to provide roughly the same square footage program on either side. And I also just wanted to really split that bridge in two and having this restaurant pub on the west side to serve the spectators who are going to the Blue Cross Arena, and then having this museum and gallery space on the east side, since there are more museums and galleries that are occurring farther out in the city on the east side. So it's really just splitting the program in two, serving the different sides of the city.
Thank you for a good study of the site. I was a little confused about things as you went through the photographs in your presentation. I'd be a little more explicit when you're using this in your portfolio about what level is above what level and where the photographs are taken. I had to interrupt you because you're talking about this very important moment in the bridge, and as you look out, and it's basically you cannot see out.
Yeah.
A couple of things I would recommend for your portfolio, and I know we're always saying, if you have more time, do this. Well, now you do. I would look at the idea that this was once water, and this was once movement on it. I'm missing that, I don't want to use the word feel, but I'm using the sense of that this used to be a major path through the United States. I mean, this is the
Yes.
Erie Canal, and I don't sense that history in it.
Okay.
Now, how do you bring that history into it how do you do that? And one thing I would recommend is that your project seems to be a series of episodes that are disconnected at this point.
Okay.
So for example, you said the market, and that's sort of circled, and then you have the ramp, that's separate, then you have and so what you have is a series of objects on this bridge. And even the trees are kind of objects placed on it. I would overlay, and this is also a graphic issue, what if you drew on this bridge plan, 0, right? Bridge plan?
Yes.
0. What if that white paper were actually a gradation or striations of, say, a pattern? Like imagine, if you will, this is for everyone in the back. It's like, what is that? You know, right now it's a white paper. Now, if I had drawn on this a series of lines that became a fabric, that automatically starts setting up conditions where this, all this are connected in like a fabric of a carpet, and like a tapestry. And I think I would go back in your studies and overlay a tapestry. And so that becomes a linear, so even going into the street here, what if that edge of that street edge comes through and becomes much more about this linear movement through the United States? You know, it's a critical aspect of your site. And I do think that it has some elegant moments, but I think it's not tied together yet, and not going back to the initial sort of impetus for why this thing is here. And so I think historic preservation has a lot to do, not just with reusing, but sort of calling out what is that past, and how does that past transform into the future.
You also talked about the paths along the river
Yes.
on the other side, and you went to the effort to extend on both sides, but there doesn't really seem to be any attention or celebration to those moments where you get to this place. This is the one bridge that's closed, the one bridge that you can cross, and you've made it special that way, but then you haven't really addressed that or celebrated that at those points, so we should think about that.
To build on Eric's point, this was where the Erie Canal was, and that was so important historically. And then I look at your top plan,
Yes.
and I think of the High Line, and I think what would the High Line look like superimposed on this in terms of scale? Because the High Line has set up very high bar for outdoor pedestrian walkways. And it's so rich, and this is so simple. I think one could be inspired by the High Line. And then I look at your ice skating rink, which I understand is going to be like 8 months out of the year, because this is Rochester, and I think, skating round and round in a circle. That's kind of boring. What if the skating rink was actually a long track that moved back, and I could actually skate across the river? And in the summer, it's just a waterway that interacts with sculpture and pedestrians. It can be a very, very complex landscape.
You'd have to bring in a lot of Dutch people.
I may have missed this, but did you added the building, that L-shaped building?
Yes.
Well, I kind of look at it in
Perspective.
perspective with the green roof, I guess, and wonder how you came up with that facade design.
Yeah, so that's mirroring the aqueduct building. So this building right here. Well, I wanted to be, I wanted it to feel like it's part of the city instead of building some different, glass or something structure, and especially with its relation to the aqueduct building that is going to be transformed into residential uses. I wanted to have that relationship between the two as being these new residential hubs right on the bridge.
I think there's probably more of an opportunity there to celebrate this very special place in the city. And then also about facade design, the nature of that glass pavilion. I look at the model and I see one span with one arch, then with 3 arches above it. And I would think that somehow that would have been taken into account in sort of articulating, at least the breakdown, the glass breakdown above. And I'm trying to understand, I guess it's set back from the edge about, what is that?
This is 14 feet.
14 feet. Okay, so you don't really see it standing right on top of that masonry.
Yes.
Still.
I just want to go back to what Eric had mentioned before about creating a kind of tapestry or texture across the top surface of this thing to help to unite it. And I was just looking online at Piazza Navona is about 600 or 700 feet below.
Yes.
And it has 3 episodes in it in terms of its plan. It has the fountain before rivers and the 2 other fountains at the north and the south end of it. And what really unites the piazza is the ground plan itself and the articulation of the ground plan. So I think that's really something to think about. And also the fact that the piazza itself embodies, it's a palimpsest that embodies the form of the Circus of Diocletian that previously existed there. And I'm just sort of wondering that, going back, that ground plane, right now when I look at the ground plane in this image, the plan image on the right, the trees end up being very episodic in there, and the moment at the center, this kind of glass cube, I think could have functioned more like the Fountains of 4 Rivers as a kind of destination piece towards the center. It may have actually sponsored moments at the 2 ends, at the bridge heads at the 2 ends as well to kind of articulate that. And then at the surface, the ground plane, a pavement material might have been helpful in determining the scale and a rhythm. So for example, as my dad got older and had Parkinson's, I watched his ability to walk distance decline precipitously over a very short period of time. And so just thinking about walking and resting, thinking about things like lamp fixtures, seating, street furniture, things that I don't usually spend lots and lots of time imagining about, but thinking about how that might become part of the rhythm of this thing in a contemporary sense, like the way in which it happens on the High Line. So that level of development
would be something I would think you'd want to think about, a way to kind of unite this whole thing, and then potentially the narrative of the site could be embedded into that as well. What's the chocolate about? I missed that.
So that is made by a local chocolatier local to Rochester, and that is the Rochester's logo. It's the Flower City.
Made from Erie Canal water.
Not Erie Canal water. No.
Thank you.
Another great project that combines both, I think, really well your preservation background and studies, and you're clearly very sensitive to the object, to the bridge itself, and I think some of these comments about the way in which you could bring that history to light a little bit more through your design, I think it is a good one. We talked about some of these ideas about the skating across the bridge. We talked about the Chateau Frontenac and that wonderful skate that you can overlook, the old city of Quebec. So I think there are these opportunities for moments and design in that flow at the upper level for sure. And I also agree with this idea of connecting the path. For example, can you ride on that path on the right-hand side, which I guess is the east side, and turn and ride your bike through the bridge?
Yes, since there is that elevated walkway that is occurring at the same level as that plaza.
Yeah, and that just, again, isn't complete. This idea of the levels, and we've talked about this many times, it's such a complex setting that I think doing a better job of articulating how people move through this and illustrating that a little bit more as you go forward will do a lot. But I think it's just great. I love the way you've rendered it. I think your images are superb, so thank you very much.
Nice job, Kelly. I'd like to pick up on a couple of things and also maybe ways to extend the conversation. Picking up on Colleen's question about why the lantern is smack in the middle, and the conversation about how you might program this and bring back some of the sense of movement and connection. So a couple of things. One, it would be wonderful to see a night rendering of this bridge and how this lantern works. My sense is it's too short. My sense is it might have been something, there are multiple ones, smaller ones, and then there's a kind of way in which you're shaping the space on the top of the bridge and then creating spaces that are more conducive to different kinds of activities or gathering. I wonder also if you could start puncturing from that surface down into the lower level, so we're getting light into the bridge, into that inner part from above, and similarly we might see a glow out. In terms of, so I think starting to really consider that section, I thought the point about raising that walkway and getting the view out is a really valuable one to consider. And I'm skeptical about bikes and people walking on the same path, and wondering if that might create an opportunity where that section actually perhaps jogs, and there's a sense of path for the bikes and maybe a path next to it for people. And so there's the sense also then of different speeds of movement going by, and then you might have places that are along that path that become pauses, places where you can maybe even look out to the bridge at a different, out from a different level. So starting to look, right now that path is just, it goes, down there, and I think you can play with that. An interesting project that was proposed, and a version of it actually happened, but not in the original, was Sheila Kennedy and Frana Violich's Interim Bridges project. Are you familiar with that?
No.
So they proposed, knowing that the highway was going to be submerged in Boston, and that there would be basically 10 years of construction. Looking at the photos of when the highway was built, they kind of played those backwards to imagine how it would take down. And so in the 10 years, they imagined building pedestrian bridges that crossed the Big Dig, and that in that work there would be archaeological things which would bring things up. And so it feels to me like there could be spaces, and maybe it's something that becomes part of the lanterns, in which there's artifacts and things about the history of the site and the stories that adds a kind of content layer into the project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the idea of maybe using.
Fair enough. I like that.
Okay, sorry.
The idea of using the glass on the lantern or a series of lanterns to do sort of etched images of some of those amazing historical photographs you have, things like that.
Yeah, to introduce that history, more of the history
Moments
back.
of history along the way,
One other thing, when you think about the High Line, one of the things that makes it so fun is not only those views, but there's places for kids to play, there's those seesaw things, there's other stuff. So, this is a lot of, I know this is a lot of work to get here, and we're just suggesting the next level work, but it's in part because it's so exciting about what this could be for the city. And so thinking also, I wish you were also getting an MRed degree, so how much retail would you need in order to make this happen? Maybe you do need some of these lanterns to actually get program at the top. And so there are some businesses at that level. And then how do you, like the High Line, create funner places to be, skateboard parks, thinking about this at night, sort of the range of people and activities over the seasons and across ages.
Yes, thank you.
Carl's nodding yes, which means, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, Kelly. Very nice to see all this together. This is one of these projects that, student picks it, it's your hometown, you know this area very well. That's not necessarily a good thing because you know always objectives when you're dealing with places in your hometown. But also wrestling this bridge and this canal, I think, is sort of one of the things that happened. It took us a long time from the committee to understand it. Both from its historical point of view, but all the different levels going on there. It's extremely complex. And making them all sort of sing together off the same sheet of music is not an easy thing. I think the jury comments, a lot of them are things we touched on.
Yes.
Like bringing Dutch people into the speed skating across the top, we talked about that. I think the one drawing that you mentioned, to think about your portfolio, that center perspective with the pod storage unit in the middle there, I think probably for me, this really ought to be a killer drawing. And right now, it still is very kind of utilitarian, it looks solid, but in actual fact, you want it to be transparent, you want it to be fighting, you want it to light up at night and things like that. So if there's one drawing that I would say, gee, you really ought to revisit, to me it's that one. Because the issues that are brought up about the heights of it, the height of it, and the imageability of it, you have to realize that this has to control the scale of the whole river valley. So probably thinking a little bit more about the height would be useful. So a lot of the learning that happened here, I think for you, was just balancing the sort of what you wanted to achieve in terms of honoring the landmark, but being sort of very sensitive about what are the things that it allows you to do versus what are the things that are more difficult to achieve. I've never talked about making all retail down there and stuff, and that's always a difficult proposition when you have situations like this. On the other hand, I think the business of taking this industrial infrastructure and repurposing it and trying to find uses for it, putting a garden on top, the High Line certainly does that in many cases, connecting it to plazas at either end. So what if it causes traffic chaos? You know what I mean? It brings some sort of really memorable, potentially brings some sort of memorable public space to Rochester, which I think can only be a good thing. I think also memorializing the graffiti there would be a tendency to scrub it clean and make it all nice and everything. That's also part of the history. It was part of the Erie Canal, but then it also had a period of life when that sort of thing happened, and I think it's admirable that you're trying to kind of celebrate that. I think in the end of the day, I think, Carl Elefante, president of the AIA, said the most sustainable building is one that already exists. And what I like about this project is taking this industrial artifact and finding a better use for it other than just something that automobiles cross, and making it something that you can transform into a new piece of public life for Rochester, which seems to me a very, very important thing to do. The business about the pathways and the actual buildings and how they lay out, and you put there, and kind of like, things, so there's probably no building. But the big idea of the public space and taking this thing, which has such an important role in the history of Rochester and the United States, seems to me to be exactly what the city of Rochester, the big thinking that the city of Rochester ought to be doing with it. So, thank you for bringing the project to us, and congratulations.